so I want to invite and introduce some of the speakers. Unfortunately, Katja Faria cannot make it today. She could not travel. So we have two people on the panel today. And the first is Dániel Szalai. So Dániel Szalai is a Hungarian visual artist and researcher, investigating human-animal relationships in industrial settings. Szalai's work reflects on the role of technology in instrumentalization and exploitation, and explores what technobiopolitics means for humans and non-humans. Szalai studied photography at the Moholy Nagy University of Art and Design in Budapest and University of Applied Arts in Vienna, and holds a degree in art and design theory. He is currently a fellow at the Academy Schloss Solitude and a doctoral candidate in multimedia art at Moholy Nagy University of Art and Design. He lives and works in Budapest.
Thank you for the nice introduction, and for Victor for inviting me and the TU-Delft. It's really, really nice to be part of this panel. Quite moved and excited. So the introduction, I think, really told who I am, and I think it's also important to clarify that I talk today or present my work as a visual artist, and and I'm observing these questions of technobiopolitics from and what it does to these regimes imply for us humans and non-humans. So I'm quite closely linked to human-animal studies, and actually I'm doing my PhD on human and animal studies, or animal studies implied in artistic practices. I've been working on this topic for quite a few years now. I mean, not that many, of course, not decades. I started in 2017, and I'm going to talk about three of my projects that I was asked to talk about, but I'm super happy to talk about. And the first one is called Novogin, which you can see here. Actually, it premiered here in the Netherlands in Breda, and Breda Photo 6 years ago. In this project, I'm dealing with an eponymous breed of chickens, which is a so-called commercial layer. Novogin White Light was developed to use its eggs in the production of vaccines and other medications. And the core of the work is a kind of workers' tableau comprising 168 individual portraits of chickens, which portrays them as the protagonists of the industry, but also pays tribute to their invisible life-saving labor. And I think it's quite important that the scale of the work is quite important, as it brings up the question of individuality. So the fact that at first glance we may suspect that all the portraits, or many portraits, are taken of the same hen unreveals the way we think about these animals, and how we basically kind of conceptualize them as mass-produced identical products that are at the same time functioning as an individual factor unit producing another product, the egg. It's quite fascinating that if you go up to the website of Novogin, you can browse through the chickens as under the title products, and then there's brown and white and whatever you want. And I also find it quite telling that it's, this representation of these chickens is often interpreted as anthropomorphic. Recently it occurred to me that it's a kind of Freudian slip. I feel that we kind of that like this having an individuality, or being a person, or like having at least personality is considered as a kind of exclusive human feature. And the dichotomy of this chickens being products and producers or individuals at the same time is emphasized by them being lit on the threshold of advertising and pack shots and portraiture. It's quite important that I come from the background of photography, but I also spent half a decade in commercial film production as a location and production manager, which made me quite skeptical about and critical about the role photography plays in our current society, and also in our relationship to nature. I kind of consider it as a corrupted medium, so to say, an accomplice of capitalism. And which plays an important role in our relationship to animals, and I wanted to use the medium in a reflective and critical manner, including the lighting, of course, and it was quite a nice time when we had this big poster on the Gare du Nord in Paris some years ago, because it really emphasized this kind of advertisement part of it. And maybe just an anecdote about the blue background, because it's of course the French and the Dutch tricolor. But it's also, it has, of course, quite important historical references, like art historical references, but it's the least present color in nature in a tangible material form, and is also the first synthetic pigment to be produced, so it reflects on the chickens portrayed being natural and technological at the same time. And yeah, along the portraits, there's an extensive series of documentary photographs documenting the eggs waste through the process of vaccine production and farm facilities that kind of make it clear that the hens and the eggs serve in the process as organic raw material, as biological carriers of technology. Yeah, I'm going to wrap up here. Of course, it was quite shocking to see how Norwegian chickens live. They live in a completely sterile, isolated environment to produce these so-called SPF eggs, specific pathogen-free, so they are kind of sterile eggs. But it raises a very important dilemma, and I think dilemmas are always important to me in my works, that I tend to be critical, but I always try to present yeah, questions rather than just clear agendas. And I think it's also important in the sense that these hens live the way they live, but they produce something that then saves the lives of other animals as well as humans. And yeah, it just sheds light on our interdependence. And yeah, there's a lot more to speak about this project, especially COVID, which came 2 years later, or almost 3 years after I did the project, painted it in a different light. But I'm going to talk about two of my latest works that that deal really directly with the theme of cowborgs. So what actually first caught my interest and turns my attention towards the cows was in 2018. I read the news that Cargill, the largest privately held corporation in the US in terms of revenue, and an Irish tech startup came to Paired Up to develop a facial recognition program for cows. And reading this, I couldn't help but draw parallels in similar processes in human society as it was around that time when China's surveillance state building caused the stir, and also Shoshana Zuboff published her book on surveillance capitalism around that time. So it really made me wonder how we got here to that we have cameras watching our cows and computer programs advising us on how to manage the farms. But it's, more importantly, what does it mean to us, and how does this reflect our relationship with these animals? So since 2019, I've been more or less focusing on precision agriculture and the impact of and implications of using advanced technology and digital imagery in dairy farming. And yeah, it was quite interesting. I mean, we are all quite familiar with this, and Victor has already spoken about it in his speech. But I just wanted to bring this slide here about the connected cow. Surprisingly, the Financial Times was already talking about the connected cow in 2017. And here I saw that basically this facial recognition is just one of the many devices used. But I think this this connected cow is quite important, because this is literally the cowborg. It's basically an animal connected to the Internet of Things, embedded in technological and economic assemblages that produces not only milk but data. And I find it interesting. And just as an anecdote to this, I've been to a precision farming conference a few years ago, and there was a guy talking about a new bolus that they developed that can be inserted into the reticulum of the cow. And he was super fascinated about this new technology. And they said that, first of all, it was interesting that he said that the battery in the sonda or in the cow lasts for 6 years. I was like, great, but I mean, we all know that the life cycle of a production cow is usually shortened than that, but not naturally. And also I asked, like, what do they do then with the device? And then he said, basically, it's together with the intestines, it's being used as a slaughterhouse waste. And I was like, wow, this is literally the cowborg. Like, a modern dairy cow at the end of its life cycle produces electric waste. So I think it's just really interesting. This extensive technology infrastructure is, of course, used to quantify all aspects of the cow's life and to treat each individual as a kind of data set. So using computer vision, AI, and robotics, today's dairy farm kind of works as a new kind of panopticon in which animals are subject to continuous digital monitoring. And just again a side note, but I think it's a very interesting one, that it's not an airborne parallel to mention the panopticon. I did an interview with the CSO of Caintus, this company that produced the technology, and they said that the development of the program that they created, the Bentham's panopticon was actually used as reference, and they coined it the Cownopticon when they pitched it for future investors. And I was like, wow, okay. So one you can really say that precision dairy farming is an example of surveillance capitalism applied to animals. Of course, this is a nice and fascinating story, but I'm an artist, so I wanted to talk about this and really say something about this and share my experience. But I think it's very important to highlight that when I started to work on the project called Unusual Hertz Potential, which was actually the marketing slogan of the company back at the time, that this process, or like what is really at stake, cannot be photographed. I cannot talk about it in an effective way using photography, because the technology is a kind of black box, and I can go there and I see some cameras, devices, and that's it. But I really wanted to do something about the major stakes, or like the underlying stakes of this, and talk about like this disembodiment and this attachment from detachment from the cow. So that's why I started using photogrammetry eventually, which is a 3D scanning technology based on photography, which was originally developed for cartography and surveying, which has technical and static characteristics that I think have quite interesting metaphorical potential that can be exploited to convey meaning. First of all, it's important that this is at first a measurement tool rather than a means of self-expression. So I find it quite important or interesting to work with this technology. Secondly, it's also the way it works, of like the principle of extracting three-dimensional information of two-dimensional images is quite figurative, and it tells how nature is technologically and culturally mediated, and how we kind of literally create a sense of reality and reconstruct three dimensions of representations. And this, of course, this farm management, like in this kind of mediation in farm management that we already touched upon in previous presentations as well, is very important as basically for the program and for the cow and for the farmer using it. The cow is not given as flesh and blood, but as visual and datafied information. But of course, the information stock as and with which the cow is described is not the animal itself. So basically, the automated farm acts as an infinite feedback loop between technology and the cow. And if the user intervenes, then it also happens very often through the computer or the interface based on the information provided by the computer. And I think that's important because that basically means that these technologies are new means of consolidating the distance between human and non-human entities through virtualization and gamification. And thirdly, I find it very important that this technology, photogrammetry, is often used in cartography, because this links it to colonization and control. As Tom McCarthy says in the preface of the book, Mapping It Out, mapping always at some level involves violence, and I think it's quite relevant because the dairy industry is about the colonization and the exploitation of the non-human female body, as animal capital became productive by learning how to use the generative functions of female animals for its own benefit. And last but not least, employing this technique enables the representation of the subject as a kind of cloud of information, so like a exploded view, and lends the image as a kind of painterly experience or appearance, which results in a work characterized by let's say, I used to say that it's a 21st century bucolic imagery in which the datafied existence of animals belongs to an increasingly technological landscape perceived through digital means. And now let's see if this runs. Yeah, and that's a break for... Ooh, okay, no. That was too much to ask, right? Okay, sorry, I haven't used Keynote before. So yeah, it's actually quite important that this, as I said, this detachment and disembodiedness is quite important because, and this mediation, because I very often felt that when I enter these barns that I'm intruding a place where I don't belong, because it's exclusively reserved for cows and technology, and it's not humans basically keeping these cows, but technology. And yeah, so in these places, humans and animals have less interaction, and the cows have no managers. And here I link back to Sophie's presentation, so that the cows don't have a manager in a Taylorian sense, but they instead are conditioned to participate voluntarily in their exploitation. They are free to move within the facilities, but they spend their entire life cycle in a closed system. And I think that's quite important, like to conceptualize and think about cows sometimes in relation to the working class, because we can see similar processes. So Hard and Negri argues that the flexible working hours that we see that characterizes both for this production are the same, are also the products of capitalism's compulsion to adapt. So that the shift from biopolitics of, like the biopolitics of the must, of discipline, to a psychopolitics driven by the compulsion of the possible, let's say, is the new, more effective technology of power under neoliberalism. And we can see similar processes in the field of agriculture as we have moved from the 9-to-5 job to an increasingly flexible corporate culture. We have moved from the coercive management of cows to the implicit management of, or even more, conditioned self-management. And yeah, in his essay, Berger argues that to approach an animal often prefigured to an approach to man, and he says that in the first stages of the Industrial Revolution, animals were used as machines, while in the post-industrial societies they are treated as raw material, and that he adds that this reduction of the animal is part of the same processes that by which men have been reduced to isolated productive and consuming units. And now I get my little notes back. Yeah, and I think in that sense it's actually quite interesting how Shoshana Zuboff paralleled the pioneering work of Ford and General Motors in building corporate managerial capitalism with that of Google and Facebook building service capitalism, because these companies use actually quite similar techniques that to turn our personal reality into data that can be commodified then that large agricultural companies use to monitor and control herds and individuals of cars in order to maximize productivity and optimize farm operations, which again resonates with Braidotti's thoughts on how cognitive advanced capitalism profits from the scientific and economic understanding of all that lives and monetizes data. And here is something that is important to me, that Braidotti argues that this opportunistic biogenetic political economy includes the blurring of the distinction between the human and the other species when it comes to profiting from them, and kind of unifies all species under the imperative of the market. So that's also kind of important statement in relation to my work. And a last side note to that is that there is the most widely used farm management program in Hungary is called Ricska, which is the most common nickname, or used to be the most common nickname for cows. And in this program, the farm workers and the cows are reachable from the very same menu, and it's all so they are listed below each other. And I think this cannot be told better, that they are both part of the working class. And in that sense, the last part of the work, a collection of salt licks, is maybe even more important, as it provides a counterpart to the images by bringing in materiality and the agency of the cows. So these mineral licks, originally manufactured in these cubical forms, were shaped into these beautiful animalist and organic forms. And I think they kind of symbolize, in that sense, the cow's rebellion against our endeavor to turn them into parameterized communities, so they kind of communicate and suggest that there's always a way to lick back, so to say. Part of these salt licks are presented on these metal trays that are filled with black epoxy that resembles oil or wastewater. And in that case, in that sense, they refer to the ecological impact of the dairy farming, but also, on the other hand, of Industry 1.0. And they were inspired by this experience of walking among the cows in the shed, where it occurred to me that these, in a sense, the cows are like locomotives, like they're literally huge biological machines running on fossil fuel. So a cow drinks about 100 liters of water and takes in 20 kilos of feed. And they are, in that sense, I really feel that they are descendants of the Industrial Revolution. And this made me wonder how much our society being like very, very developed, but still being so tied into classical modernism and Industry 1.0. Yeah, and the last project, I hope I'm in time. I didn't check the time, sorry. So the last project I'd like to just briefly show is called Generation. And in the previous work, Unleash Your Herd's Potential, I was dealing with management mostly. But in my research, I also explore other aspects such as evaluation systems and reproduction management, which Victor has already touched upon. So I'm not going to go into details, but I find it important that all these means, all these judging merit indices that also actually expresses the cow's value in terms of in currency, breeding programs, employing like this genotyping and other mating softwares, AI, which here stands for artificial insemination and not artificial intelligence, embryo transfer. They are all means of so-called development that actually serve human needs and, or more precisely, technological and economic purposes. So in the world of livestock production, precision agriculture, techno-Darwinism and capital Darwinism is basically a practice principle. And in this last work, I just wanted to I wanted to reflect on that. Let's see if I can start this video just as with the other one. Yeah, I have to push it. Yeah, so this goes back to Victor's question about what the future of the cow would look like. So I was thinking that if there are these new mating software that work with the data derived from evaluations and also the farm management software, like the information provided by the farm management software, and then kind of create a biometric matrix that determine which cow and sire should reproduce in order to attain specific breeding goals that are, of course, dictated by these associations that consider mostly production, emission, and profit aspects. Then I was really wondering, like, in that sense, we can say that the evolution of the modern dairy cow is governed by algorithms. It exists in its infinite feedback loop between the computer and itself. So yeah, it's just an evolution governed by algorithms according to a principle that prioritizes animals' compatibility with the technology and its efficiency in serving economic goals. So it made me wonder then, okay, if we let go of the algorithm, how will the cow of the future look like? And to reflect on that, I created this project called Generation, in which I used GANs. So I took thousands of photos from sire catalogs and databases that Victor also showed, and created a training image data set of Holstein Friesian cows and fed it with this machine learning algorithm that works in a kind of similar way, in a sense that it uses in this training data set to generate new elements, similarly to how those breeding programs work. So there you always have the goals, but the actual output is always predictable. And in that sense, I think, again, technology can be read metaphorically, just as in the previous project, or you can say, paraphrase Marshall McLuhan and say that the technology is the message. So here, again, of course, it's a speculative work, but I wanted to think about it, like, what does this technologically and visually mediated relationship does, and what if we take the visual data, what if we give, let go of the algorithm. And this project, the last video I'm going to show about it is that the project is actually shown on this holographic LED fan, it's called, which again first was developed as a shopping window display to catch attention, so it's a means of advertisement, but also it refers to this disembodiedness of the animal. It's floating, and also evokes the giant air conditioning fans, which you always see because of ventilation at farms, but associates the global temperature rising. And last but not least, you can't hear that now, but it creates this monotone mechanic noise or like a soundscape to the work. Yeah, and to wrap up the presentation, I'd like to quote Fahim Amir, whose work I really admire, and I also consider him now a kind of friend of mine. He wrote this text actually for the book I produced. So he says that encounters with otherness in which one develops a curiosity and looks back seriously are starting points for rethinking one's own way of being and the constitution of the world. And he also adds that these encounters are usually far from innocent, but grasping their complex nature allows us to get a more complete and profound understanding of the world that we inhabit and that inhabits us. And basically in my work as an artist, I'm searching for and also aim to create opportunities for such encounters by looking at naturalized others. And coming to dead jokes, I just realized that we spoke about others a lot today. And domestic animals are particularly interesting to me because of the burdens of our shared technological, economic, and political reality, which makes me empathize with them and identify with them. And I believe that investigating our relationship with these animals allows me not only to reflect on our general attitudes about nature, but also explore what it means to be subjected to a human system, and through that to question the status quo. Yeah, and I think I'm going to just stop here and thank you for your attention.